The world outside was barely awake when Maya Bennett maneuvered her squeaky cleaning cart across the polished marble floor of Atlantic Plaza's 23rd floor. The time on the wall clock blinked 6:43 a.m. A few fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a tired, older than 32 reflection of her. She inhaled deeply, her trembling fingers clutching the master key. It wasn't the cold making her shake. It was the fear, the kind that became a permanent houseguest when you lived paycheck to paycheck. "Just get through another day," she whispered, more to herself than anyone else. The rent was due. Ella's 12th birthday was just 2 weeks away, and all Maya had was $300, barely enough for a cake, never mind a party. Her 2004 Toyota Corolla groaned in the parking lot, practically on its last leg. Every morning felt like tiptoeing on thin ice, praying it wouldn't crack beneath her. She paused in front of a door with polished gold lettering, Richard Vaughn, CEO, Vaughn Development Group. The man behind that name was an enigma to her. Sharp suit, sharper words, always on the move. Men like him didn't even register people like her. To them, she was just part of the scenery. Invisible, replaceable, forgettable. And maybe that was for the best. The invisible are seldom noticed. She unlocked the door and slipped inside. The office had a faint, lingering scent of expensive cologne and mahogany. She moved with practiced efficiency, emptying waste bins, wiping down desks, straightening chairs, her mind wandering back to Ella's school note about overdue supplies. Guilt weighed heavily on her chest. Then, something out of place snagged her attention. A thick folder lay open on the CEO's desk, pages scattered haphazardly, like fallen leaves in autumn. In bold letters, the first line screamed, Declaration of Bankruptcy. Her stomach lurched. She glanced at the clock. 6:55 a.m. No one would be in before 8. She shouldn't look. It wasn't her place. But her eyes wouldn't obey. She leaned closer. Total consolidated debt, $64 million. Her brow furrowed. The numbers felt off. Years of handling cleaning invoices and painstakingly balancing every penny for survival had sharpened her intuition with figures. She began to scan the creditor list, her lips moving silently as she did the math. 12 million, 8 million, 15. She ran the sums twice, then a third time. $47 million, not $64 million. Her pulse quickened. Someone had padded the numbers by $17 million, conjuring debt out of thin air. It wasn't a typo. It was a deliberate setup. Someone wanted Richard Vaughn to sign away his company based on fraudulent debt. Her father's voice echoed from a long-buried memory. If someone had told me the numbers were wrong, I could have fought back. He'd lost everything to accounting fraud years ago. Died broken and betrayed. Maya's throat tightened. She knew she should just walk away. But another voice, stronger and more insistent, rose within her. Do something. She pulled out her cracked phone and quickly snapped pictures of every page. Then, she snatched a yellow sticky note from the desk. Her hands trembled as she wrote, Mr. Vaughn, please check the numbers on page 7 before signing. The total debt adds up to $47 million, not $64 million. Someone inflated the figures. Please verify this before it's too late. Then, she signed it, a friend. She stuck the note to the top page, carefully straightened the papers exactly as she'd found them, and hurried out. At 7:45 a.m., she clocked out in the basement. She should have gone home, but her feet refused to cooperate. Her heart hammered so loudly she thought she could hear it echoing throughout the empty parking garage. At 7:56 a.m., a sleek black Mercedes glided in. Richard Vaughn stepped out, but he wasn't the powerful CEO she'd glimpsed before. He was a man hollowed out by defeat. His suit was rumpled, his eyes red-rimmed, his shoulders slumped under some invisible weight. He clutched a leather briefcase to his chest and walked toward the elevator, looking like a condemned man walking toward his execution. Maya hid behind a pillar, torn between fear and a compelling curiosity. Just go home, she told herself. But something inside her needed to know if he had seen the note. Minutes ticked by. Then her phone rang. Unknown number. Ms. Bennett. The voice on the line was low and strained. Yes, she whispered. This is Richard Vaughn. Are you still in the building? Her mouth went dry. I am. Don't leave, he said, his voice urgent now. Please, I need to speak with you right now. The call ended. Footsteps echoed down the garage ramp, fast and uneven. When he appeared, she froze. The man who approached her wasn't angry. He was broken. Tears shimmered in his eyes. In one trembling hand, he held the sticky note. Was it you? His voice cracked, a whisper filled with disbelief. You wrote this. Maya nodded slowly, bracing herself for the explosion. For him to fire her, humiliate her, call security. But instead, the unthinkable happened. The billionaire dropped to his knees on the grimy concrete floor in his $5,000 suit and sobbed. You just saved my life, he choked out. You saved everything. Maya stood frozen. She had never seen a rich man cry, not like this. He wiped his face, trying to regain his composure. 17 million in fake debt. My partner, Austin Monroe, forged them. He planned to force me into bankruptcy and buy the company for $500,000. A $60 million empire gone in minutes. And I was about to sign. She stared, wide-eyed. I checked security logs, he continued. Only one person accessed this floor before 8 a.m. You, a single mother. You had no reason to help me. There was no name on the note, no demand for money. Why did you do it? Maya swallowed hard. My father lost everything because of numbers that didn't add up. No one warned him. I couldn't let that happen again. He stared at her, something shifting behind his exhausted eyes. Respect, gratitude, humanity. Come with me, he said suddenly. Austin will be here in 10 minutes. I'm going to confront him, and I want you there as a witness. You saw the real documents. She hesitated. Every instinct screamed run. But she thought of Ella, of birthdays, of a life she'd been surviving instead of truly living. And she took his hand. The elevator ride felt endless. Inside the glass walls, she saw their reflections. The billionaire and the cleaner, both trembling for different reasons. Whatever happens, he told her. Don't be afraid, just tell the truth. When the doors opened on the 23rd floor, the morning sun streamed through the windows, flooding the office where fate waited on a mahogany desk. 8:27 a.m. The secretary's voice crackled through the intercom. Mr. Vaughn, Mr. Monroe is here. Rick looked at Maya. It's time. He squared his shoulders and said, Send him in. If you were Maya, would you have left the note or walked away and stayed invisible? Austin Monroe entered the office with the slow, self-assured confidence of a man who had never had his authority questioned. His silver hair was neatly combed back. His gray suit was pressed to perfection, and his smile was as polished as the cuff links on his wrist. Rick, he said smoothly, feigning surprise. I didn't expect an audience. His gaze landed on Maya, then flicked back to Richard. You're bringing staff into executive meetings now? How progressive. Sit down, Richard said, his tone calm but charged. The air crackled with tension, every second pulsing like a frantic heartbeat. Maya stood in the corner, clutching her phone tightly, afraid to even breathe. Austin settled into the chair opposite the desk, crossing one leg over the other. You look terrible, my friend. Long night? I told you once you sign the papers you'll finally be free. Richard's hand pressed flat against the table. Free? He said quietly. Or stripped of everything I've built? Austin chuckled. Rick, come on. You've been drowning for months. I'm the one throwing you a lifeline. Funny? Richard said, lifting the folder between them. Because this lifeline has $17 million in imaginary debt. Austin's smirk faltered for the first time. What are you talking about? You tell me, Richard replied, sliding the sticky note across the desk. The small yellow square looked harmless, but the words written on it had already rewritten 2 destinies. Austin stared at it, reading in silence. For a moment, nothing moved. Then he smiled again, but the edges of his mouth were tight. Someone's playing games, he said smoothly. You're letting a janitor's prank derail a legal process. Maya flinched. The way he said the word janitor burned like acid. She's not a janitor, Richard snapped. She's the reason you're not in handcuffs already. Austin laughed again, this time without warmth. You're losing it, Rick. You can't take her word over mine. I've been your partner for 15 years. Richard's voice dropped low. And in those 15 years you learned exactly how to bury fraud so deep no one could find it. Until she did. Maya's pulse thundered in her ears. Richard motioned toward her. Show him. Her hands trembled as she plugged her phone into the conference screen. The images appeared one by one. The original documents, the correct totals, the false additions. Richard narrated each slide like a prosecutor building his case. $47 million in debt. That's the real number, but your version shows $64 million. Care to explain the difference? Austin's jaw flexed. Clerical error, he said flatly. $17 million is one hell of a typo, Richard said. Especially when every error leads back to your office. Austin's mask cracked for just a second. You can't prove anything. Oh, I can, Richard said, pulling out a thick envelope. Julie Baxter kept your emails, Austin. The ones between you and Franklin Rogers at Consolidated Supply Partners. I know about the fake creditors, the inflated invoices, and the kickback waiting for you once you forced me into bankruptcy. For the first time, Austin's confidence completely crumbled. You went through my private emails? I didn't, Richard interrupted. Julie did. She came to me last night. You remember her, right? The secretary you screamed at until she quit? Turns out she didn't delete those backups. Austin's breath came in ragged gasps. His eyes darted between Richard and Maya. You think this ends with me? You can't take me down without dragging this whole company through the mud. Richard stood slowly. Then we'll rebuild from the ashes. But you, Austin, you're done. He nodded toward the door. The FBI is on their way. I suggest you call your lawyer. Austin's face twisted with a mixture of rage and panic. He turned to Maya, his voice dripping with venom. You think he'll actually remember you in 6 months? You'll go back to being invisible, scrubbing floors for people who forget your name. Richard's voice sliced through the air. Get out. Austin hesitated, then grabbed his briefcase and stormed out, slamming the door so hard the glass rattled. Silence flooded the room again. Heavy and surreal. For a long moment Richard didn't move. He just stood there, staring out the window at the sprawling city below. The man who had almost lost everything was breathing again, but every exhale sounded like the weight of years leaving his chest. He turned to Maya. He was right about one thing, he said quietly. I didn't see you before today. You've worked here for 3 years, and I never even knew your name. Maya lowered her eyes. That's just how the world works, sir. No, he said sharply. That's how I worked. Blind. You saved $60 million because you saw what everyone else ignored. You noticed. You cared. That's worth more than every degree on my payroll. He reached for a notepad, scribbled something down, then handed her the paper. Starting Monday, you'll report to the Internal Audit Department. I'll pay for your training, your courses, whatever you need. I want you there, looking for the things we all miss. Maya blinked, unable to speak. I don't understand. I'm a cleaner. Not anymore, he said simply. You're my new junior analyst. She shook her head, tears threatening to spill. I can't accept that. It's too much. It's not a favor, Maya, he said softly. It's justice. He smiled then, a small but genuine smile, the kind that comes after weathering a storm. Go home, see your daughter, take the rest of the week off, and when you come back, start your new life. She stood frozen, the reality slowly sinking in. When she finally spoke, her voice cracked. Thank you. He looked at her with quiet conviction. No, Maya. Thank you for reminding me what integrity looks like. That night, as Maya drove home through the streets of Chicago, her Corolla rattled louder than ever. But for once, she didn't care. She replayed everything in her head. The numbers, The sticky note, the tears, the promise. When she parked outside her small apartment, she stayed inside the car for a moment, watching the warm glow from the window where Ella was waiting. For the first time in years, she didn't feel invisible. Inside, Ella ran to her with open arms. "Mom, you're home late. Did something happen?" Maya knelt and hugged her tightly. "Something big, baby," she whispered. "Something that might change everything." They sat together on the couch as she told her daughter about the morning, the mistake that saved a company, and the man who offered her a second chance. Ella's eyes widened with wonder. "You mean you're going to work in an office now, with a computer?" Maya laughed through her tears. "Yes, sweetheart, with a computer." Ella grinned, wrapping her arms around her mother. "You're amazing, Mom." Maya closed her eyes, holding her close, breathing in that moment of peace she hadn't known in years. For once, the future didn't feel like a threat. It felt like a door opening. As she turned off the lights that night, her mind still buzzed with disbelief and hope. But deep down, another thought lingered, a quiet unease that wouldn't let go. What if Austin Monroe wasn't finished yet? Do you think Austin will try to get revenge after losing everything? 3 months later, the wind whipping over Chicago carried the crisp bite of late fall as Maya stepped off the bus in front of the Vaughn Development Group building. She no longer entered through the service entrance. Her ID badge now granted her access through the glass doors of the main lobby, and people greeted her by name. "Morning, Maya," the receptionist called, and she still wasn't used to hearing that tone, warm, respectful. She smiled and took the elevator to the 18th floor, where her desk waited beside a window overlooking the cityscape. Her title plate read, Maya Bennett, Junior Audit Analyst. Every morning, she touched it, as if to reassure herself that it wasn't all a dream. The first few weeks had been terrifying. She hadn't understood half the terminology her mentor, Clara Freeman, used in meetings. She'd stayed up past midnight, watching online tutorials, scribbling complex formulas into notebooks while Ella slept. But slowly, things started to click. Numbers began to speak to her again, just as they had that morning with the bankruptcy file. By the end of her first quarter, she was catching small inconsistencies that others had overlooked, and Clara's praise started to sound less like encouragement and more like genuine belief. "You have a gift, Maya," she told her one afternoon. "It's not learned. It's natural." Still, not everyone was welcoming. A few of the senior analysts resented her sudden rise. They whispered behind her back, calling her the janitor miracle. Some even hinted that she had some kind of special relationship with Richard Vaughn. Others mocked her mistakes in hushed tones that weren't as quiet as they thought. She ignored them until the day Roger Maddox, the senior analyst known for his arrogance, decided to put her to the test. He dropped a thick folder on her desk and said, "Let's see how good you really are." It was a deliberately convoluted maze of reports, receipts, and numbers, designed to confuse and overwhelm. He smirked. "If you can actually find what's wrong, maybe you're not just a lucky janitor." Maya spent hours buried in that folder. She cross-referenced every figure, scrutinized every date. When Roger returned, fully expecting her to fail, she calmly handed it back to him. 7 discrepancies, she said. 4 of them are serious. She listed them one by one. Duplicate expenses, fake trips, false restaurant invoices. By the end, Roger's face had turned pale. Later that afternoon, security escorted him out of the building. He'd been inflating his expense reimbursements for months. Clara hugged her and whispered, "That was brave, Maya. You saved us again." That night, Richard called her into his office. "You've done more for this company in 3 months than some people do in 10 years, he said, sliding a document across the table. "I want you to lead a new internal task force. Review every major contract from the past 2 years. Find anything that doesn't add up." The paper detailed her new position, lead auditor. Salary, $9,800 a month. She stared at it, speechless. "You deserve this," he said simply. "Not because of luck, but because you see what others don't." She accepted with tears in her eyes, thinking of Ella and how much life could change from one small act of courage. Months turned into a year. The task force uncovered more instances of fraud, saving the company millions of dollars. Vaughn Development became a shining example of integrity throughout the industry. The story of the janitor who saved a billion-dollar firm spread like wildfire through business magazines and morning shows. Reporters clamored for interviews. Universities wanted her to speak at their campuses. Maya always declined, until one day Richard walked into her office, holding an invitation from the University of Chicago. "They want you to give a talk about ethics and accountability," he said. "You should go." She hesitated. "I don't belong on that stage." He smiled. "You belong there more than anyone." On the day of the speech, she stood backstage, her palms sweating. When they called her name, the audience erupted in applause. Hundreds of people filled the auditorium. She stepped up to the microphone and said quietly, "2 years ago, I was invisible." The room fell silent. "I cleaned floors in this city for a company I didn't think even knew I existed. Then, one morning, I saw numbers that didn't make sense. I could have looked away, but I didn't. I left a note." Her voice trembled slightly. That note changed everything. She told them about fear, the insidious kind that whispers, "Stay quiet," about the shame of being unseen, about her father's devastating loss, and about how doing the right thing often means standing alone. "I wasn't brave," she confessed. "I was terrified, but courage isn't the absence of fear. It's choosing to act anyway." When she finished, the applause continued for so long that she had to step back from the microphone. In the second row, she saw Ella clapping, her eyes shining with pride. After the talk, journalists swarmed her. One asked, "Do you think people like you can really change big corporations?" Maya smiled softly. "I don't know if I can change corporations," she said, "but I can change one man, and he can change a company." The man standing beside her nodded in agreement. Richard then announced the creation of a new nonprofit organization, the Vaughn Foundation for Integrity, dedicated to protecting whistleblowers and funding education for underprivileged workers. And he added, "Our director will be the woman who started it all, Maya Bennett." She froze in disbelief. "Me? Who better," he said, "than someone who knows what it's like to be unheard?" She accepted the position. Under her leadership, the foundation grew rapidly. Within 2 years, it had helped dozens of workers safely expose fraud and rebuild their lives in the aftermath. The media dubbed her the invisible woman who made the world see again. But Maya didn't care about titles. What mattered was that people who had once hidden in silence now stood tall. She met with janitors, factory workers, waitresses, people who reminded her of herself. She listened to their stories and told them, "You matter. What you see matters." One autumn evening, sitting with Ella in a small restaurant by the river, Maya gazed out at the lights shimmering on the water. "Do you ever think about how different life could have been?" Ella asked. Maya smiled. "Every day. If I hadn't looked at those papers, if I'd just walked away." Her voice softened. "We'd still be struggling. I'd still think being invisible was safe, but I would have missed everything that came after. The people, the purpose, the chance to show you that doing what's right can change everything." Ella leaned her head on her mother's shoulder. "You're my hero, Mom." Maya brushed a stray strand of hair from her daughter's face and said, "No, sweetheart, I'm just someone who finally stopped hiding." Outside, the wind carried the scent of rain and new beginnings. For the first time in her life, Maya didn't feel small. She felt seen, valued, and alive. The world might still be unfair, but she had proof that one act of honesty could ripple farther than anyone imagined. Could rebuild companies, heal families, and even redeem broken souls. As they left the restaurant, Maya's phone buzzed with a message from Richard. The foundation hit its 1-year mark today. 43 cases resolved, over 12 million in recovered funds. "You did that." She smiled and typed back, "We did that." Under the bright city lights, she took Ella's hand, feeling a quiet certainty that some stories never truly end. They simply keep growing, like light spreading through dark hallways. That morning, years ago, had been about saving one company. But in truth, it had saved two people who had forgotten what it meant to believe in themselves. If the story resonated with you, tell me in the comments. Do you believe one small act can truly change everything? If it touched your heart, comment the number 100 below, so we'll know you were here with us, and tell us which country you're watching from. Share the story so more people remember that kindness and courage still matter in this world.